Wednesday, the 19th of November, and I'm trying to do more lives. I'm trying to do more videos. I'm trying to keep up with the pace that I've set because I've been making a lot of content, putting a lot of content out, and it's kind of weird because I go through phases of wanting to do work and then phases of, I can't be bothered. But I know that when I do something and when I do put content out or when I put lives out, I tend to get a good response. Sometimes lives are well attended, sometimes they're a little bit quieter. Maybe you're watching this right now on the live, or maybe you're watching this on the re-record a little bit later. But very happy to see you here this evening, and we can talk about really whatever you want to talk about. So at the moment, of course, everybody is wondering about the budget. That's just around the corner, and it's let's be honest, it's looking quite dire if you are not one particular sector of the population, as in if you're on benefits, it's going to be good for you by the looks of it. If you are public sector, it's probably going to be good for you. But anybody who's run their own business, as I have forever, anybody who's enjoyed any kind of success over that time, anyone who has a PAYE job where you work hard, anyone who's trying to make more money is looking likely to get absolutely hammered by the next budget. So obviously it's all speculation at this stage, but I've been looking at all the things that they're gradually saying we think this is where it's going to go. They're pretty sure there's going to be some additional surcharge on bigger properties. So I'm going to get hit by that, whether that's an annual thing, whether it's an exit thing, a sales thing, or whether it's a new rebanding of council tax. I'm likely to be hit by that. EVs, they're talking about 3p a mile. Who knows what they're talking about? Well, I'm going to get hit by that. Then they're talking about dividend tax, reducing it used to be quite a decent allowance, it's now down to £500. I think it was 12 grand at one point. Anyway, it's 500 quid now. So they're looking at getting rid of that, and they're looking at increasing rates there. So there's at least 3, 4, maybe even 5 things that if they go through with it all, I'm going to get absolutely hammered. And so I do find myself a little bit irritated, angry, frustrated, not quite sure how to kind of argue this. When people keep saying, "Oh well, it's only fair. It's only fair that those with the broadest shoulders should be allowed to, should be requested, should be expected to pay a little bit more," it absolutely drives me nuts. Because I can tell you now, the majority of people who they are thinking of who should be paying a little bit more are already paying a lot more. In fact, this started, believe it or not, in the last Conservative government. If you go back about 5 years, what was happening was the Conservatives realised that they couldn't keep taxing lower and middle earners. So they actually shunted some of the thresholds and some of the rules around that meant people further up were getting taxed a lot more. So when they say those with the broadest shoulders should be taxed a little bit more, they already are. We already are. And of course, this government is absolutely mad for charging more and more money to an ever-reducing bunch of people. So we are in a stupid situation now. I mean, an astonishingly stupid situation. Oops, there we go. An astonishingly stupid situation where there's going to be this argument that people should pay more tax, that it is fair to pay more tax, but actually we already are. And then then there are still going to be people claiming it's not fair, it's not right. And part of the problem is the misconception of how money and levels and rates and incomes actually work. Because whenever I try and explain this to people, right, they always say, yeah, but the super wealthy, they've got loopholes, they move abroad, they move their money around different countries. Those people exist, but they're like that much of a percentage of actual people in our day-to-day society. So just as a thought experiment, try this instead. If you imagine in the UK today, we have people earning nothing, right? So people on benefits, or people who are on, the 12,500, that kind of really low level, or just into the early teens of thousands. So we know there are people on really, really low income or no income. Let's take at the upper end £150,000, because the problem at the moment is that we talk about people who are low paid compared with mega millionaires or mega billionaires, which is kind of a ridiculous argument. mega millionaire or mega billionaires, we might want a different policy to deal with them, but comparing the one with the other is ridiculous. Most of us know people who are broke. Most of us know people who might be really struggling. We might know people who are mid-range income. We might know of, or we have people in our social grouping, or at least people we occasionally, we know we might need, like doctors or solicitors. We know them who might be near that 150,000. But probably none of us know the mega billionaires. So we need to take those out of the argument. We ought to be looking at 0 to 150,000. Now, if we look at that as a bell graph, bell chart, bell thing, we end up with a really obvious point, and that is those on zero income, right, are still paying too much tax. Because even if you're earning nothing, even if the only money you get is from benefits, you are still paying tax, because everything you buy is taxed, all the services you need are taxed, literally everything's taxed with VAT. And there are other taxes as well, of course, fuel tax and alcohol tax and tobacco tax. So there's always taxes. So even at no income, you're paying tax. Now, the problem is, and this has never really been reasonably and honestly attacked by ministers, by prime ministers, by politicians. We tend to then think of those people against the mega billionaires. Take the mega billionaires out. Take 150,000 as the top level of income. Now, there's a range between 100 and 125,000 when your effective rate of tax is actually 62%. Now, this was a conservative thing, right? This is what they did. They shifted the thresholds around. So once you hit 100, you start losing your personal allowance. So for 100 to 125, you're actually paying 62%. Once you hit 125, then it drops back down to 45%. So we're in this ridiculous, and it's a ridiculous situation where we are loading a lot of pressure and stresses and pressures and charges on the people who are not only least likely to use council services or benefits services or state services, but they're actually not allowed to. So look at it this way. If we think about council tax, right? The way it works at the moment is if you have a bigger home, you pay more council tax. Now, we know there are anomalies. So we know there is, take a standard terrace in Burnley, compare it to a mega mansion in Chelsea, and the mega mansion in Chelsea pays less than the place in Burnley. We know that, right? We've all heard that example. But again, that's skewing the market. If we take 2 million at the top end of property prices, right, you're in a bit of a weird place, because again, take out those 10, 30, 100 plus million pound properties. Those are kind of irrelevant for most of us. So if we take what's the cheapest property currently in the UK? Well, I've seen properties in this last week at 20 grand, 30 grand. But if we take 50 grand as the lowest and we take 2 million at the highest, right, you could be in £100,000 property. There could be a family of 5 of you. You could be unwaged. You could be claiming every benefit going, including your council tax paid for you. You could be getting all sorts of local council support. In other words, you don't put any money in and you take a lot of money out, right? Because it costs to do a lot of things. You could be a couple living at a £2 million property. And because of the way our perception works, £2 million property, a lot more money, they should pay more. But the £2 million property could be using no council services whatsoever. They're not eligible for any benefits, not eligible for any support. They pay everything, and they're paying much more than everyone. And so we've got this situation. The whole thing is based much more around envy and our perception than the reality. By the way, let me know if you're into this conversation. Drop something in the comments. It'd be lovely to hear from you. Lovely to get into your questions, your comments, your observations. Very happy to see those and see what you are wanting to talk about. That'll be good. So this is the problem we've got now. And we're doing the same thing with income. We're doing the same thing with people who run companies, right? People who run companies should pay the same tax as people who are on PAYE. Well, they shouldn't. They shouldn't, because not only do you take all the risks, not only are you completely on your own when it goes wrong, because you are, by the way. If you work for yourself, if you run your own business and it fails, it's on you. But if you work for a business and they muck around and they fire you or they don't behave correctly, you have the full weight of UK employment law. So to say, well, we should have this tax self-employed the same as this tax employed, it's not reasonable. If you are running your own taxes, you ought to have the opportunity, as we do currently, to put your own costs in, to run your own accounts, to have a bit more leeway than somebody on PAYE. But there's this ridiculous, and it is envious, right? It's envious, and it's a lack of understanding of the reality of things. If you live in a big home and there's two of you, and your home's worth £1 million, your home's worth £500,000, right? That's one of the things to talk about putting an extra council tax on. I currently pay £5,500 per year in council tax, right? And the only services I use are the bins. Now, this is one of the points where people trip over their own feet when they try to argue. They go, yeah, but you still have access to the police and the fire and the roads and, you know, all those things in case you need them. Yes, I do. But so does the person at a Band A home. And so the argument shouldn't be, what are all the services that you can use? Great, we've all got access to those. Only I don't have access to any of the support-based levels because of my income, because of where I live. And so therefore, there's this situation where I have to pay more. Well, I knew that because I bought this house, right? I knew I was going to get a Band H. I knew that. That's just the way it is. But if you then say, well, it's fair for me to pay more, you don't understand what word fair means. If you pay more, you ought to be getting more in return. You can't just say, well, you pay more because it's a bigger house. That makes no sense whatsoever. David, good evening. What do you think of how to get people back to work? So I think there's no single solution, right, David? If you do any one thing without doing other things in order or at the same time, it'll all fall down. And again, when I've explained this to people before, one of the arguments I made this last week is we have a problem with universal credit, we have a problem with benefits, we have a problem with in-work benefits. We currently take we hand out 38 billion to people in work benefits, and it costs us 45 billion because we spend 7 billion administering the system. So this is the obvious point. So I'll come back to your question in a second, David. If we want to, for example, raise tax thresholds, so currently they are 12,570. If we raise that to 20,000, if we lowered the tax rate from 20% to say 18%, 17%, if we did that, more people would keep more of their money. If more people kept more of their money, then they wouldn't be eligible for in-work benefits. And so they could earn exactly the same money, but have more of it. And if they could have more of it, it'd be more of an incentive to do that. Now, simultaneously, you've got to get rid of this stupid thing of, oh, well, if you work 16 hours, you can get these benefits. Because there are undoubtedly people who go, well, I'll work 16 hours, then I'll stop, thank you. And the rest of it will get me benefits. That's a perverse incentive to stop working. But what we've also got to do is to get rid, and this is the one that people get upset about, of minimum wage. Minimum wage, as it was intended, was a good idea. So there are people who are lower end of income and they are struggling to do what they need to do. So we ought to pay them a minimum wage. So that sounds reasonable. Of course it does. Except what it does is it distorts, impacts the levels above it. Because if I've now got to pay you as a new starter, right, and with respect and love, if you're a new starter, you generally don't know anything, either because you're very young, you're new to the world of work, you're new to that sector, or because it's just a new place for you. So it's going to take you time to catch up. But at the moment, I've got to pay you the same as somebody who's worked there for a while. So I can't differentiate. And I can't now pay you, right, if you're here and the government says that's the new minimum wage, oh, and by the way, we'll put national insurance on top, that makes employing you much more expensive. And so therefore, every job above that has to be paid more. I've got to, when minimum wage is increased, I've got to increase the wage of the supervisor. And then I've got to increase the wage of the manager. And then I've got to increase the wage of the district manager, because everybody needs a pay rise. And because the government is your 50% business body, There's a national insurance component on top of all of them. And so what happens is you end up with far more costs. So all of these things are happening. And if we stop, and it's the government, the last governments, previous governments, it's governments meddling in things they don't understand. Governments don't understand work, they don't understand commerce, they don't understand profit, loss, they don't understand any of these things because they just take our money when they need more of it. If we can allow, as David says there, minimum wage should be whatever people are prepared to work for to create competition. There's a degree of that, David. Now, clearly we know that some people are in pretty poor situations, but I spent most of my 20s working for £3.50 an hour. Now, that's not me going, oh, the good old days. It was fucking awful, right? I hated it. I'd have loved a minimum wage at that point. But what it meant was, because I didn't want to do those kind of jobs, because I was always trying to set new things up, I was always on the hoof to get another one, there was lots and lots and lots of £3.50 jobs to go. So whenever I got fired because I was moving on to something else, or because I found a better deal, or because I needed some time to set up my own business, whenever those things happened, it kind of didn't matter because there was always something around the corner. Whereas if I'm paying you minimum wage, right, and you've got some sort of benefits tied to that as well, then you're really just going to get on with it, slog on with it. It kind of kills ambition. And the other thing, the other problem with all of this, so all of these things are connected. If I've got to pay you minimum wage and that impacts everybody above you, I'm going to hire fewer people. I'll hire fewer people because it costs so much to hire them. So I'm going to tell you to work harder. If you want the job, do more. Work harder, work at a quicker rate. Try and squeeze extra value out of you. That makes the job worse for you. It makes it more intolerable. I'm not going to promote you if I can avoid it, because that costs even more money. If I can keep you where you are and get you to do more, that makes more sense. And so everything the government has done when it comes to minimum wage, national insurance, employers' national insurance, when it comes to benefits, in-work benefits, it's all presented, and it was intended to help people. But the outcome it actually has is it distorts the market. It makes it harder for a good member of staff to shine. And so we end up, and I've made these points before in videos, right? And people just don't get it, because as soon as they say reduce your credits, your in-work credits, or get rid of minimum wage, they go, oh, it's all right for you. Da, 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 da. They have no concept of what I'm actually saying. This would actually make things, and by the way, this will make things better for most people. It will help more people lift themselves out of a bad situation. Now, what it won't do is to protect the worst workers in society. So, no nice way to say this. We aren't all equal. Not everybody wants to work. Not everybody wants to improve. Not everybody wants to get ahead. Not everybody wants to develop. Not everybody wants to improve their skill set. And so if you did something like this, one of the outcomes would be some people who are less inclined to work, less determined to step up, to improve, to move on, they are going to slip down the desirability level for employers. And this is exactly, by the way, what's happened in the housing market. So all of the talk about rent caps and the Renters' Rights Bill, I mean, it's an absolute disaster for tenants. But all of these things, they distort the market. And so what happens is you end up with the very best tenants or the very best employees, they're fine. They'll get good properties, they'll get good jobs, they'll get better wages, they'll get fairer rates. That'll all be fine. Good landlords, good tenants, they attract each other. Normal tenants, normal landlords, they will gravitate towards each other. They'll be fine. But the normal landlords are being reduced. There's less and less of them now because of, again, government meddling. And so the decent, average, okay tenants, they're swirling around a bit more. Some of them will try and get themselves into better properties, which they can't really afford. Some of them will have to stay in crap landlords, dangerous landlords, bad landlords, criminal landlords, have to stay in their places. That's not fair on them. Then, of course, you have the bad landlords and the bad tenants. They're always there. But because you're losing medium level, average, decent landlords, the bad ones are going to stay there. They don't care about the rules. Now, we have the same problem in employees and employers. The good employers, they'll get better wages, they'll go to better jobs. Most average employees, and that's most people, they're swirling around trying to find somewhere decent to work. They'll mainly be okay. Might be a bit of wage up, might be a bit of wage down, slightly better, slightly worse conditions. They'll be all right. But your very worst employees, the lazy asses, the ones that are always off sick, not because they are sick, but because, who wants to work, the ones that can't be asked learning anything, those are the people who will drop down the desirability chain. And so if you think about the word fair, which is misused by most governments, that would be truly fair. If two people are in the same job and one of them, and they've both been there the same amount of time, and one of them's going, yeah, I'll do that, boss, take me or pick me, I'll learn, yeah, I'll go on a training course, yeah, I'll get there early to do this thing. You get that employee, and the other one is like, pay me what you have to pay me. I can tell you, and I've made this argument before on socials, and people just don't get it. Some people just don't get it. The employer, the boss, will always pick that person who's keen. And ultimately, they will want to hold on to them. And if you get rid of minimum wage, this is why those people are more inspired and want to stay there. They've got a good job. The boss won't want to lose them. And so the boss will end up offering them more money, which they can do because they don't have to pay the crap one the same money, right? They can offer the good one more money. They can be more comfortable about saying, listen, I think we should move you forward for supervisor. You've got a real gift at this. You've really shown willing and effort. Because businesses have to carry minimum wage, because they have to carry these extra heavy national insurances, the cost of employing you just gets higher and higher and higher. And so bosses do this. They'll hire fewer people. They'll promote fewer people. They will pay you all. They have to all pay you minimum wage. So that becomes the downward pressure. It pulls wages down. It doesn't pull wages up. And when Labour government, particularly, and they're not the only ones, the previous government did the same, but Labour government really believe this. When Labour government say we're putting more money in your pockets, we're supporting working people, they couldn't be further from the truth. What they're actually doing inadvertently is making it worse for working people. What Labour are actually doing with this minimum wage argument, we'll give you more, we'll pay you more, we'll pay you more, is they are depressing the wages, because that becomes that minimum wage plus national insurance, workers' national insurance, employers' national insurance, that becomes a weight pulling down the costs for, not pulling down, making the costs worse. It's a drag. It's a drag on the business. The business has to carry that extra weight. And so it's much easier for the boss to go, well, I've got 5 members of staff. I would have employed a 6th, but, maybe give them some better shifts. But you know what? It's really expensive. I'll hire another one. And they don't do it. And the employees will do job hugging. The employees don't want to go anywhere because they know getting a new job's difficult. And so all of this whole process, the whole Labour approach, just makes it much more difficult for anyone to get ahead and move on, to have more money in their pockets. And it's a perverse disincentive to making more effort. It's the same thing we're going to see with tenants and landlords. We are going to see tenants increasingly struggle. If you go back 2 years, properties in the northwest, so not central Manchester, but that kind of area. If you look at properties there, an average property in an average road, not a especially nice one, just an okay, you could live there, would have 4 or 5 inquiries when it was advertised. Last year, that 4 or 5 inquiries had spiked to 12 to 15 inquiries. I haven't checked more recently. Now, why is that? Greedy landlords? Nope. No, it's not. It's because landlords are leaving, because councils are putting more costs on, the government's putting more costs on, and the government has now launched this ill-fated renters' rights. And renters' rights does what Labour governments, what Conservative governments have always done badly. They mess with markets they don't understand, attempting to solve a problem they haven't fully articulated. They say there are horrible landlords kicking you out of your home at a moment's whim. And everyone goes, yeah, fucking landlords. Those landlords do exist. But the story they miss is that most landlords, the high percentage, I would say 85% plus, would much rather you as a tenant stay there for as long as you like, as long as you pay the bills and look after the place. I can tell you now, the vast majority, 85% of landlords, if you sign up for a property, you pay the bills, you are respectful, don't cause a problem, they will much rather keep the place in reasonable condition, do repairs, collect the rent, make a modest climb every year, because that is what you both need. You need somewhere to live, they need someone to pay the bills. That's their return on their investment. That's your home. Everyone wins with that arrangement. But the story that you've read about over and over and over again, and politicians love sharing, is these horrible landlords. Oh my God. And those landlords do exist. No one's defending them. Nobody wants those people, right? They should be out. They shouldn't be around at all. But the government goes, right, we need to deal with them. And by the way, they've got all the laws they need to deal with them, but councils don't use them. So what they do is they go, we need a new law. We need another new law. We'll get another new law in. Yeah, let's put national insurance on rentals. Let's put more and more. So more and more laws pile in. And normal everyday landlords start leaving. And then we'll put more rules on and more landlords start leaving. But the ones that remain, the top end ones, and most people can't afford them. So the top end ones stay. And they are for the professionals only. So if you're in that bracket, great, you're sorted. You're not going anywhere. The utter dog shit at the bottom, the awful landlords, the terrible ones, the ones that don't even bother with the rules, the threatening ones, the cash only ones, the ones with a dodgy big brother who comes around and looks threatening if you haven't paid, those guys, they're going nowhere. And what you are losing is a big tranche of the middle, decent, average landlords. They're nothing special. They are legal. They're honest. They do what they should do. And most of your average tenants are now trying to filter into a diminishing series of properties. The other thing that governments never do is they don't talk about bad tenants. Now, they don't talk about bad tenants because there are more tenants than landlords. So if you make landlords the scapegoats, which is what they do, then everyone can go, yeah, bloody landlords. If you look at tenants, it's the same picture, by the way. You have a small percentage of tenants at the top who are lovely. They're generally going to the nicer properties. Most tenants, let's say 75, maybe even 80% of tenants are normal, everyday, average people. You and me, average people. Pay their bills, occasionally struggle a bit, phone up, sorry, I'm late, can I pay next week? Yeah, okay. There's a bit of that going back and forth. Normal, everyday people. Generally keep it clean, generally keep it tidy, might do a bit of painting in the living room. If there's a repair, can you fix it? You want it fixed. If it runs over a bit, can I complain a little bit? Wouldn't dream of leaving it in a state. Those are the everyday tenants, and they are needed by and with the everyday landlords. The problem we've got is this. Everyday landlords' numbers are shrinking. When a property comes out for rental, some people who don't understand how this works go, yeah, but the property doesn't disappear, does it? It gets sold to somebody, which means that the number of renters reduces. No. The number of renters is increasing. There are people who have to rent, people who prefer renting, and there are always more people coming into the market to rent. When people buy, they're not always out of the rental stock. First homers, people moving to a new area, people breaking up, people who have to work somewhere differently. Think about this. If you've got a home of multiple occupation, got 4 people living in it. If the landlord sells that to one family, right? That's 2 adults from elsewhere, maybe a couple of children. You've now got 2 net. You've got 2 tenants with 1 less property. This is what is happening, folks. And it is when governments don't understand the markets in which they meddle. We've been talking about money tonight. We've been talking about property tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you tonight. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please do send me some socials. Send me some ticks or some hearts if you're on Facebook, do please send me some stars. I'd appreciate that a lot. I got my first 20 stars a couple of nights ago. I think it cost the person 20 cents, so about 16, 17p. If you can send me some stars, that would really mean a lot, because it's helping me nudge the algorithm in Facebook. So do please consider doing that. That would be most impressive. But for now, folks, I'm going to say goodnight. Have a lovely rest of the evening, and I will see you, I guess, pretty soon. I just need to find the off button. Right, folks, see you later.